This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on the show. We're going to mandate get it on, and welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla in studio. Mark Garrigus.
Is this two in a row?
Two in a row.
Two in a row. I'm actually happy to be here. I saw Bald. I saw Gina. I saw Awesome Dawson.
Awesome
and now
Dawson.
You, Awesome Dawson. All in all, there's Emmy. Just yeah, good numbers, by the way.
Yeah,
Reasonable Doubt, right?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much to the people, and Gary greatly appreciates you tweeting stories at him as well. Don't you?
I do. That's absolutely true.
So wait, I want to start with this story, which I think whatever side of the ledger you're on Donald Trump, this story today, for everybody who says Donald Trump was addled or Donald Trump was dementia or this or that, no. He's a Machiavellian genius, because this story today, Gary's going to set it up, and I'm going to explain at him why he thinks he's a Machiavellian genius, and then I want to hear a conspiracy theory.
Good. I've not even heard the story.
Okay.
I mentioned it to you briefly. The headline is Trump is reportedly telling people close to him that he will be reinstated as president by August.
And this is coming on the heels of the QAnon, what was it?
QAnon shaman?
The Dallas festival, the QAnon festival,
right,
where Sidney Powell was there, and she first floated the idea that he's going to be reinstated with no credit for time served, but that he'll be reinstated. So the theory is, why would Trump be saying this when he knows it's not going to happen? Why? Can you think of do you want me to tell you the theory?
No credit for time served would be prorated or not prorated,
right,
meaning he would just be president for 3.5 years.
Right. So the theory is that the reason they're targeting August is that clearly his lawyers know, and I would assume once they convene the grand jury, generally what happens when you convene a grand jury, and it was done in New York State by the AG and the Manhattan DA's office, that generally you send out or either target letters, or you indicate that somebody's a target. His lawyers know that he's a target. They're expecting, based on a number of things that are happening behind the scenes, that he's going to get indicted. So in his infinite Machiavellian twisted reasoning, he puts out there that he'll be able to say, once he gets indicted, that the reason he's getting indicted is because they're afraid that the audits in Arizona and other places are going to show that the election was stolen. And right before he gets reinstated, the great left-wing conspiracy indicted him to stop him from being reinstated as president.
Wow.
How fucking genius is that?
I guess. You definitely have a better handle on it than I do. But unless there's something he has that we don't know, is there something he has that we don't know?
Apparently the audit in Arizona, and I say audit with some degree of smile, that it's somewhat of a rigged game, and that based on that, he's going to be able to claim at some point that there was, even though he struck out 60 out of 60 on the legal lawsuits, and Powell, who floated this the same way as has been talking about it, that he will then claim that this is the way for the Democrats and the left wings and the radical left to stop him from his rightful throne, which is the presidency, which I wish I had that kind of ability to come up with those kinds of theories. That's a pretty amazing theory.
Well, here's kind of been my head on it. I would never proclaim to know whether there was, rigging or tampering or whatever. I would never know that. I would go along with the vote. But he could probably conclude, and he probably could prove, that mainstream media and big tech was colluding against him coming into the election. There's an interesting TikTok from Russell Brand, who's progressive kind of English kind of. Well, you guys don't know.
Yeah, he was in. I know exactly. He was in one of my favorite movies. His character was great. What was the movie?
Saving Sarah Marshall, Falling in Love. It's
Forgetting.
Forgetting. Ironically, forgetting the title of Sarah Marshall. He just put out a
brain of his is something else.
He just put out a TikTok vid that basically said, "Hey, I don't like Trump, but Facebook taking down all the Hunter Biden laptop stuff and declaring it Russian misinformation. Do you want to live in that society?"
Well, I'm horrified by some of the twisting of logarithms to damp down. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. If you don't think that's frightening, I don't know what is.
Right. So to me, and I've heard other people express this, the election wasn't stolen because ballots were miscounted. The election was swayed by big tech mobilizing and either saying, you're deplatformed, or there's nothing to the Hunter Biden laptop story, or, all the mainstream media sort of ganging up on Trump. So being kind to Biden and negative to Trump, that's good for, 8 or 10 percentage points. And that, to me, now you could say there's nothing illegal about it, and maybe there isn't, but that, to me, if I'm him trying to make an argument, my argument isn't at the ballot box. My argument is with big tech and many other folks saying, how would one, what if we were just selling detergent and I was gain and you were tied, and we're just selling laundry detergent, and we're supposed to have a sort of level playing field to sell these, and may the one who sells the most product win. What if big tech all colluded against Tide? And they're just putting out stories saying that it's tainted and that it could be dangerous.
Like the Fortnite Epic trial with Apple,
right,
which is that you have to pay, and that the gamers are basically, the argument is the gamers are subsidizing the other the marketplace there, which is interesting. Gary, do you have the Russell Brand video? I saw you feverishly. Did you see Gary over there typing?
I do have it. It's just going to take me a few moments to get it to the right computer. I'll play it for you guys shortly.
Yeah,
I think it's a two-parter, but it's kind of...
And I don't have it.
Well, maybe there's two.
Well, that's interesting.
Maybe it got sent to me in two parts. I don't know.
Because I was reading something the other day about the idea that if you shut down the marketplace of ideas, or if you limit the marketplace of ideas, and I thought about this interestingly. I think that General Flynn, there's been a lot of discussion in the last 2 days about his comments at this same conference, where he was talking about a coup, and he was asked the question, and then people were, arguing. At least I was watching MSNBC. There was a drumbeat for whether the DOJ should be looking at him for sedition. And then they weren't going to. One of the anchors said, "We're not going to play it for you." And I thought, that's interesting. Well, why? I have to go up to. So what I did is I had to search for it, and I found it and saw it. And I understand the argument completely, but it's words. And if we've gotten to the point where we're not going to confront words, then it kind of reminds me of some of the cynicism of God Saad, who we've had on, in the parasitic mind, because there is a real threat. At the same time, people are arguing, and Biden made the argument about the soul and the kind of the empathy of democracy. But at the same time, democracy is also premised on the First Amendment and speech. And that's what I do for a living and what you do for a living. We're in speech. And it's a frightening time.
Yeah, agreed. So interesting that the election could have been swayed, but I don't think it was by votes. It was by influence. And that's that'll be... That's an interesting argument to make.
It is an interesting argument. No one pops in to as part of the counter argument to that is, remember the people who were aghast over Willie Horton. And for those of you too young to remember, Willie Horton was Lee Atwater, who's now deceased, but was one of the original Republican operatives who used that against Michael Dukakis. And remember?
It was featured. You're talking about featuring the ad where they let out the black
they let him
prisoner
out.
And then he killed somebody else.
Exactly. And I don't know which was more effective, that or him riding around in the helmet in the tank. But
Dukakis,
a lot of people, a lot of people credited Willie Horton with the Democrats losing. And so you have to say, well, if you can make the argument that kind of gaming the media with a message that is misleading is a regulation of speech that they shouldn't be in, especially if you're talking about entities that are putting themselves out there on the public airwaves, then I see the argument you're making.
Well, here's an interesting thought experiment that I never really thought of before. But, we have debates every year, sometimes 2 or sometimes 3. In this case, we had 2, I think. And they're going to go out. It's going to be carried by the networks.
Right.
And maybe one network will host it, and they'll carry it. So if you said, well, when candidate A spoke, we'd let him speak in its entirety, and then when candidate B spoke, we'd jiggle the mic cord, and it would break up a little bit. We wouldn't hear,
we'll break away,
to a commercial. You wouldn't hear all of it. Well, then everyone would say, well, that's not fair. That's not a democracy. You can't have that. You got to have this and you got to have that. So with that model in mind, what is that different about Facebook and Twitter?
Well, I will go so far as to say there's something about, him saying he lost the election, Trump saying he lost the election. I get it. It is now almost required that it has to be framed the big lie or the false without any whatever, as if you're a third grader. And we have to say that. And it's almost like that's guilt. And the guilt is, well, the same media that was getting ratings. The reason CNN, by the way, was covering Trump wall to wall was nothing more than ratings. I mean,
Sure.
Jeff Zucker, who is the president of CNN, is the same Jeff Zucker who at NBC put Trump in business at The Apprentice. So it's a very straight line. He knows the ratings. And so when you keep saying or preface everything, there is a little bit of, I think, editorial overreach if you're just trying to get the reports. I understand it's a big lie. I understand that you want to say that and you don't want to mislead people. But at the same time, you're also interpreting it. You're putting a filter on that, and there's something about the First Amendment and free speech that I think is counter to that and to that idea.
Well, on that sort of vein, I kind of woke up this morning and I thought, what happened to the pipe bombs at the riot/insurrection Capitol building? Remember there was that whole story about they found pipe bombs? I started reading about it, and they never found the guys, and they still don't seem to know what that story is. It was pipe bombs that were hidden the night before somewhere in the vicinity, but they didn't really seem to have any suspects, and they had some footage, but that's about all they had. I didn't know,
and it's interesting
what that was. Like, what
Instead
were the
of
pipe
spending
bombs?
all of our time trying to characterize this thing, I get the characterization. I understand both sides' characterization. I mean, I know where I fall in. However, I certainly would like, I think, and the American people deserve some kind of disclosure or information that's not filtered, that's not spun, if that was possible. But I guess maybe that just isn't possible anymore.
All right. Well, when you find that vid, it's a TikTok. you can tell us.
Can you tell me how you got the TikTok? Because it appears what you're talking about is pulled from a very long interview and podcast that he did, which has a video element, and it looks like he's taking an isolated portion and putting it on TikTok, but it's like 30 minutes what the original source material is.
Oh, okay. Drew sent it to me.
Okay, I'll hit him up. Thank you.
Yes, and there were 2 separate vids. But all right, so what's
but
another?
what would you? Well, before we go to another story, because this fascinates me, because this is what you do for a living, what I do for a living. If you could wave your magic wand, how would you solve it? How would you solve the problem of the polarization with this idea that each side's got kind of their agenda, and we just can't seem to articulate or have a touchstone that is free speech and understanding what free speech is?
Well, I don't think you're going to enable or stop Fox from being Fox, and I don't think you're going to stop CNN from being CNN. Although, CNN is now recently kind of talking about the Wuhan lab leak and some stuff that was foreboding, a few months ago. So they're starting to kind of get on. They're getting a little away from Trump and a little more on to here's what may be happening in the world. But I don't think you're going to, to me, that's the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's not try to convince the cheerleaders for each team to cheer evenly for each team. That seems like a bridge too far. I would argue that Facebook and Twitter and social media, they need to move it a little more toward the middle. That if you're going to take down one guy, then you have to be fair and take down the other guy. And you guys need to move a little more toward the center and just sort of be that town square that you'd originally reported yourselves to be, or that was your initial marching orders or decrees were that we're going to be that.
So it's interesting.
And I would also argue that the USA Todays of the world sort of move it on back toward the middle a little bit too, and the ESPNs and things like that. That these people, CNN is CNN, MSNBC is NBC, MSNBC, Newsmax is Newsmax, and Fox is Fox, and Tucker's Tucker, and Don Lemon's Don Lemon. Fine. Understood. That's the Steelers and the Ravens. But the USA Today and NBC and ABC News and Twitter and Facebook, you guys need to move it a little more toward the middle where you started.
I wish we had somebody from either Twitter or Facebook to talk to, because one of the things that has bugged me, and I've seen it not just in the elections, we saw it in 2016 when I was representing back then Kaepernick against the NFL, and I've seen it recently in the Armenian-Azerbaijan situation, is this idea of bot armies, and what I've wondered is if they've got these very sophisticated algorithms, and I know they claim they do this, but it seems to me, I thought of it the other day because Gina posted something about people with 0 to 8 followers who have just joined in a certain amount of time. And I was wondering if you're going to allow on bots that are designed, so to speak, to provoke and to create havoc. Why isn't there with the ability with artificial intelligence, isn't there a more robust way to weed out those things so that you could have discussions? And if people are idiots, people are idiots. I mean, I understand that, but why can Gina identify those bots, but Facebook or Twitter cannot?
I have no idea. I certainly couldn't. Here's Russell, part 1. I think there's 2 parts.
Did the media and social media conspire together to keep information about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's relationship with foreign energy companies out of the media? The answer is yes, they did. Look, I'm not a pro-Republican person. I don't see myself that way. I don't see myself as conservative or that I'm into Trump or Giuliani or the kind of media establishments that were reporting on these revelations. They are not my cultural, social or political allies. That's certainly not how I see myself. However, it seems to me that what reason is Hunter Biden sat on the board of an energy company in the Ukraine? What reason is James Biden sat on the board or receiving payments from an energy company in China? And at a time where we're talking about sleaze, corruption, financial misdemeanors and relationships between corporations, big business and politicians, which, let's face it, unless you're bloody stupid, you know that's going on all the time. So either change...
Yeah, it's interesting. What kind of...
We're having a little technical issue. We'll see if we can get the last part.
Drew found this?
Someone probably sent it to Drew, and then Drew sent it to me. I always found it. I said to Drew, because when we were talking to Biden's like, I never talked to my son about any business of any kind. I said to Drew, if your son had a soft swirl yogurt business, you would talk to him about the business, because that's a father and a son, and that's the business. If your son's going on Air Force Two and talking to the leaders of Ukraine and you're vice president, you'd probably have a conversation. And the only way you wouldn't have a conversation is if you said to your son, we can't talk about any of the shit you're doing. Like, I just want plausible deniability. Do not tell me whatever it is you're up to, which is also a semi-admission of guilt. But, sorry, we'll play the end.
But for me, revelations that there are financial connections between energy companies in the Ukraine, energy companies in China, and the Biden family are troubling. That should be public knowledge. And it's even more troubling that Twitter and Facebook and the media at large deliberately kept it out of the news because they didn't want it to influence the election. What is democracy then? It suggests to me that democracy is, we want you to vote for this person. We don't want you to vote for that person. As I've said, Donald Trump, I don't think Donald Trump's the answer. But I'm sad to realise that I can no longer even claim to believe that Joe Biden or the Democratic Party might be the answer. Because look at how they behave. And look at the relationships between media, social media, and that party. They conspired to keep information away from you because it was not convenient to their agenda. What does that make you feel?
Anyway,
what kind of blowback did you get for this?
I have no idea, but that's kind of the real stealing of the election, if there is an election that was stolen. It was more the media and social media that conspired versus, counting hanging chads. That to me. And, I think, circling back, and then we'll get on to the next case. I think when you're talking about, where's the end? I think the end is when people who are Russell Brand or Bill Maher or Alan Dershowitz on free speech and stuff like that go, enough's enough. I'm tired of
you saw
right.
Bill Maher the other day.
Yeah, tired of right and left with everything. Certain things are right, certain things are wrong. There's a Republican version of this too, and everyone just sort of sound minds need to sort of rise up and come together.
Sometimes I see these comments on the RD after RD, and it's like, well, when is he going to turn in his left-wing card and get a red card? No, that is, and if that's your takeaway, you've missed the whole point, right?
Yeah, well, you're missing probably Russell Brand's point, which is he's a Democrat. He's probably left-wing. He's probably very progressive. And for all those reasons, he doesn't like big tech fiddling around with the democracy. It's not inconsistent.
It used to be, he's old enough he's younger than me, I'm sure, but he's old enough to remember when the left embraced the idea of free speech, embraced a presumption of innocence, embraced the fact that journalists were supposed to push back against the man as opposed to being a cheerleader. It's wild. It's wild where we've come and where the pendulum has swung to.
All right,
Gary, what's
story two? Gary?
Story two.
Well, there's a bunch here. What do you want to talk cult mom for a little bit here, Mark?
I do. I want to. So Gary, I sent this story to Gary, and all I could think of was Susan Pinsky when I sent it, and because back when I used to be a CNN commentator. I used to joke anytime you had a white woman who was either missing or there were babies that were killed, I was on speedy dial. Because for the white woman, this is kind of, this garners ratings. And Gary will tell the story, and then I'll explain why I think this resonates with a certain segment of the population.
Well, not to disagree with you, Mark, but I'm going to try to tell this story because it's insane and there's a lot of moving pieces. Lori Vallow has been found not fit to stand trial in the killing of her 2 children and her husband's ex-wife, an Idaho court ruled Thursday. That same day, Arizona completed a separate murder investigation, and this woman has been dubbed the cult mom. Mm-hmm. Now, so several of her ex-husbands who had died in recent decades and were ruled, just totally fine, natural cause of death, stuff like that. They've started exhuming these guys and realized they were in fact murdered.
That may be like a rich man, poor man thing, being exhumed.
That's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could be the capitalist who was poisoned by the third wife, or you could be they're exhuming some of the members of the. God, it was the Texas riot. Poor black people that were. I think it was It wasn't the burning of Wall Street. That was something else. I think.
That was Oklahoma. That was just had the 100th anniversary.
This was the Texas whatever, and they're exhuming some of those bodies. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
It's not a middle class problem per se being exhumed.
No, it's not. So yeah, this woman, the news story, like the headline here is that this woman's not going to stand trial because Idaho has deemed her mentally unfit. But the more they keep unraveling this, they've had her in custody for about a year. And they had her in custody for a year while her kids were missing, and there was a 5-state search to try to find their bodies. And it wasn't until a year into her incarceration that they finally unwound this enough and found all these strings and were able to charge her with multiple murders.
Which is, and obviously you're presumed innocent. However, the fact that she's been deemed incompetent to stand trial for all the people who are very upset about that. That is not an easy hurdle to get over.
I can imagine.
The prosecution gets to hire basically their own prosecution expert, a.k.a. hired gun, and the defense does theirs, and then the courts can sometimes appoint their own. It is quite. You have to be certifiable in the common sense meaning of the word. And legally, it is such a high hurdle to be found incompetent to stand trial that this woman must really, really be disassociative.
Well, I know this doesn't factor in, but if you just look at her actions, it all seems the actions. This is not an international jewel thief and a botched heist and killed her partner or something. This is killing her kids and your husband. Or what was the name of the guy?
He was a mob boss in New York who was wandering around in his bathrobe.
Oh, yeah.
Joseph Gigante, I think, or whatever.
He would show up in his bathrobe.
Vincent Gianti.
Right. And that's, now, this is, obviously, I remember the case from Texas many years ago where the Andrea, if it was Yeager, I don't remember the exact name, but.
Sounds like
it. And then the woman in either South Carolina, who Judy Smith represented and saved from the death penalty, Ted Kaczynski. I mean, there is, Ted, it all brings back, a lot of these people are so enthralled in the mental illness. They're so far down the rabbit hole that they believe they've got a rational kind of worldview, and that's part of the mental illness, such that if you claim they are mentally ill or mentally incompetent, that is repugnant to them also. That was the Unabomber's argument all the way through appeal. And I could see the same thing happening here. And people, just because somebody can tie together a narrative in their own mind does not mean that they're competent. I've had a case that will remain nameless for almost a decade with a horrific crime and horrific depths of mental illness, and it is a real thing.
Is there any legal recourse for another municipality like the Arizona case that they were investigating to extradite someone who has been deemed unfit to meet trial?
Yeah, I think that there is. I think that you could probably make the argument that if the matter has been stayed in a jurisdiction other than Arizona, that Arizona could bring the person to their jurisdiction under the interstate compact and then do a full-blown reevaluation of the competency. One of the other problems with competency is that a lot of times what happens, and I've lived this at least 50 times, you put the person here locally, for instance, in a mental facility, a mental health facility. They get the care they need. They get the medication they need. They kind of come back. They come back. They get, but then when they're brought to court, they're transferred to the county jail, and they lose all of that, the trappings and the medications and the expertise at the mental health facility, and they quickly swirl the drain and become incompetent again. So it's this endless circle of how long do we keep somebody competent in order to have them stand trial, because there's no point in having them stand trial if they're incompetent. What are we serving?
I saw maybe on CNN some B-roll of a younger, sprier Mark Garagos in court with Scott Peterson from 2003, maybe it was, and they were talking about revisiting that.
You can say younger, less good looking. I would take the.
I like the seasoned, more distinguished Mark Garagos myself, but it struck me that Scott Peterson, it was a story about Scott and a retrial, perhaps. Can we have any updates on that?
Yeah, let me tell you what happened. So late Friday night, there's two proceedings going on with Scott. The California Supreme Court, as I've said before, unanimously last year reversed the penalty phase. And they said they adopted the argument that we were making at the time in real time, that the judge was disqualifying jurors who said, I'm against the death penalty. He didn't ask the second question, is can you set that aside and follow the law? However, if somebody said, I'm for the death penalty, that was not a problem. He let them on. So that was a death-qualified jury, which leans towards the prosecution. California Supreme Court not only reversed it, but chastised the prosecution for going along with this and not pointing out the correct standard. So that case goes back to the trial court. My ex-partner, Pat Harris, was volunteering to represent Scott there. And then the Habeas Project is representing Scott. Shortly after that reversal, they issued an order to show cause on Strawberry Shortcake. And Strawberry Shortcake was the media name of the alternate juror who, after they removed the two of the jurors during jury deliberations, she got in there, and two of the jurors said, she came in and instantly said, let's convict him, let's fry him.
They
basically.
removed two during deliberations?
During deliberations, day, I want to say 7, the guy who was the foreperson, who we called Dr. Lawyer, that's the guy that I was counting on to do justice in this case. He actually said, because they sequestered the jury just for deliberations, he told the judge, I don't know if I can be fair anymore. I'm getting threatened. I don't know if I'm delivering a verdict that is the socially community desired verdict, the one that'll get me the best book deal. Can you believe that? He was prophetic, or what? And the judge, over our objections, vehement objections, removed him and removed another juror. And that broke the logjam. That broke the hung jury. The Supreme Court issued an order to show cause, an OSC. That case is in front of the judge in San Mateo, and the Habeas Project has got that. And they filed declarations from jurors. And now the question is, will the judge there, before the end of the year, rule that he gets a new trial? Well, what happened on Friday was Birgit Flatiger, who is now the DA, the elected DA in Stanislaus County, she was on the trial team when I was trying the case back in 2003. She filed a motion that says they're not going to retry the penalty phase, and she did it in the case where they were looking at that. The cynic in me believes, my ex-partner who filed Pat's last name is Harris, he filed what's called a Harris motion. It's not named after him, but another Harris, where it says don't appoint the public defender, appoint private counsel. He doesn't have the money. The client doesn't have the money. It'll save the taxpayers money, do that. And the DA's office objected to that. DA didn't explain except to say in consultation with Lacey Peterson's family, they had decided they weren't going to proceed on the death penalty. Well, breaking news, Gavin Newsom has already suspended the death penalty in California. So talk about a waste of money, and only a prosecutorial agency would think twice about going through an exercise of the dimensions of a penalty phase of a murder case that's almost 20 years old in a state that has already suspended the death penalty. But they formally filed something on Friday saying they're not going forward.
So what's this mean? So
it now means the only decision left is for the judge in San Mateo, whose name I don't remember, Gary may find it. She is going to make a decision on whether to grant a new trial on the guilt, and she has indicated she'll do it before the end of the year.
What would it mean? Something a new trial on the guilt?
On guilt, meaning he would be retried again. And it would not be a death penalty case. It would be a case that would be punishable by most life without parole. So that would be, if that happened, you'd be looking at a case that was probably retried 18 years after the fact.
How confident would you be in your case or the case if he is retried?
I don't see how they could ever convict him, and I will tell you why. They did not reveal that they had a tape out of the Chino prison of an inmate talking to his brother about Lacey Peterson in the street, confronting somebody about a burglary across the street. And Stanislaus County had already mistakenly, clearly cleared that burglary by saying it happened on the 26th of December as opposed to the 24th. Well, on the 26th, every reporter in the world was out in front of the house and will tell you that that street is not very wide, and it's clear that there was no burglary that was happening on the 26th. It happened on the 24th. There's a compelling witness, and now you've got somebody who was talking on a tape basically saying, shut up, did she confront somebody? It was rather incriminating to them and exculpating to Scott. So given the fact that there was little or no evidence, in fact, there's no evidence of the time, and we proved that. And in fact, the closing argument, I said, they started this case 6 months ago saying that it happened on the 23rd and he waited to dispose of the body on the 24th. I showed through the evidence that that wasn't possible, that she logged onto her computer the morning of the 24th, showed the clothes she was wearing that were in the hamper that obviously had come from the morning of the 24th. So then Rick DeStasso, who was the prosecutor, now a judge in Stanislaus County, said, well, it doesn't really matter when she died. And then the second thing is, well, we did probably the most forensically tested location in the history of forensic testing at the time was that house on that street. Not any blood whatsoever, nothing whatsoever. There were the rumors of the bleach. There was this, that. There was nothing that showed that there was any killing done there, homicide done there, nothing whatsoever in the house. Then you combine that with some of the other kinds of sightings of her, and I think there's a compelling case to be made that this is somebody who's been sitting there wrongfully convicted for 18 years.
So is the theory the judge's name is Mark Wanted?
Nope.
No, sorry. Jerry Judge's name that Mark wanted. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, San Francisco Superior Court Judge.
No, it should be San Mateo.
Oh, okay.
Should be San Mateo.
All right.
Which is interesting. So you tell me, what do you think?
Well, anytime you can introduce something, which is another potential person who could have potentially taken Lacey Peterson's life, then you're a lot further down the road than, if OJ got off, but you're sort of in OJ land, which is we got OJ, but he didn't do it, but there's nobody else. We don't have any other potential anything. If you can just establish that there was a dicey-looking guy in a hoodie that was walking down the street at the same time, may have had a gang tattoo or something, all you need is that. That guy could have been walking a schnauzer.
And by the way, now you combine it with somebody who's in custody telling another person basically to shut up while they're on recorded tape. Then very suspicious circumstances as to why that wasn't disclosed in the first place, and the fact after that was developed afterwards that basically they did not want to be bothered with that because that was a real problem for Modesto PD with their theory.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Gary.
I actually did have it. She's a San Francisco Superior Court judge who has been assigned to cover this case in San Mateo, and her name is Judge Ann Christine Masulo.
Well, there you go. See, Gary, you did it right.
So
she's been assigned to San Mateo.
Correct.
Wow.
Interesting. So, and now Scott's in now without possibility of parole?
Correct, because now they're not proceeding, and so if he does not get a new trial, so that you understand, if this judge who Gary just named rules no, he doesn't get a new trial, they will then go federally, and he will be resentenced to life without parole. Mm-hmm. If he gets a new trial, he's not convicted, and so we start from square one, and you will sometime in the next year and a half, 2 years, have the next trial of this next generation.
Will you be involved with that?
I don't think that I will, because by then I'll be on Medicare. But, who knows?
My prediction is Mark hangs back, and if he wins, Mark swoops back in for the suing of the state trial, because that's where the deep pockets are. I also...
You really got to watch on YouTube to see when Mark gets uncomfortable. It's good times. YouTube.com/reasonabledoubt-podcast, incidentally.
Mark will be back, just not for the heavy lifting. He'll be back.
Breaking necks and cashing checks.
The thing, here's an interesting, I'll tease it before I do it.
Okay.
So much of where we were at in 2003 was Scott Peterson mania, and every white woman in the world was outraged, and how could he really get a fair shake? But as a society, we've kind of shifted. We've shifted to Chauvin. You know what I mean? It's the same pressure, same sociology, same reason there should be a change of venue, or maybe sequester jurors, or maybe whoever wouldn't get a fair shake. We kind of shifted from the citizen to the law. And if that was retried, there would not be the interest in it that there was. There would be interest, but not, we're spread too thin now, because somewhere between here and there, some black teenager is going to get shot by a white cop. There's going to be outrage, and people are going to take to the streets, and it wouldn't be under the pressure that it was when the first time around. And maybe minus that, it would be helpful to the trial. I think we've just learned that when you have jurors saying stuff like, I'm scared to leave, or I don't want to go home, or whatever, that's going to affect the outcome. And again, we have perfect examples. Scott is an example of a citizen experiencing that. Chauvin trial's experience of law enforcement, or an example of law enforcement experiencing it. So it can move. It can change direction. It can go whichever the zeitgeist wind is blowing. But I just wonder that a lower key version of a Scott Peterson trial, where people weren't deaf screaming and could actually hear some information and some evidence come in, that might be a different outcome. I'll get your take in 1 second.
I was going to say, that was the best setup of a tease I've ever heard you do.
I think I probably answered my own question. Geico, do you rent your home? Well, you do one or the other, and then there is your automotive policy. So you take your homeowners, your renter's insurance, and you put it along with your automotive policy. It's called bundling. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. So what do? You go to geico.com, get a quote, and see just how much you could save when you get your bundle working at geico.com. Get your homeowners, renters insurance, put it with your automotive policy, and get your bundle working at geico.com. So
you tease it. So
yes.
I was going to let you
I was going to say in this less volatile world where we've shifted from sort of to outraged moms to social justice warriors, might we have a different outcome with a less pressure packed trial?
This is what I wonder. At the time, I've publicly stated, I think I've written it in the book, Awesome Dawson narrated. Little plug there, Dawson.
Is it Mistrial?
Mistrial, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, get it on. Where do you get it?
I don't know.
Audible.
Amazon.
Yeah. Dawson, cha-ching. That I thought at the time, and the biggest mistake I made was not having it televised. I thought that would dampen the crazy atmosphere that I perceived there. It didn't. It made it was a giant miscalculation because you had people who were not in the courtroom commenting on it breathlessly from New York and other places in Atlanta and didn't really see what was going on, didn't see how there was a complete collapse of witness after witness after witness in their theories, in the prosecution theories. So now fast forward to now and then your theory. You almost like, do you think that if it was televised, that a generation removed, because it's basically the next generation, a generation removed of whatever X demographic would end up becoming obsessed again? And if that was the case, would you want it televised? Would you not want it televised? Do you think that it would dissipate, or do you think that it would kind of some of the things that we see or phenomena that we see that happens every generation would occur again? Is that a possibility? I don't know the answer.
I just feel like the zeitgeist today is when you kind of remove race from the issue and you kind of remove systemic this and abuse of power and stuff like that. We like it. We just don't love it. I don't think it's going to.
I think we're going to find out
in
this summer, because this will be the first summer that cable news has not had Trump to focus on during the summer months.
Right.
Because it used to be cable news during the summer, there was always a case, white woman, missing kid, something like that they became focused on. So it'll be interesting to see in the next 4 months if we have something else that gains that traction for cable news, or if it proves your point that nothing can gain the traction because we're too fractured.
Well, also, and you tell me how this factors in, by the time this goes down, he would have been incarcerated for 20 years or something.
Right.
In a way, you're really conducting half a trial, because when he was 31, then he was going to go in for 50 years or 40 years or whatever it is. Now he's 51, and he's kind of conducting half a trial. In a way, I don't mean half a trial, but the sentencing part of it is there's just a difference. But also, you do, and you tell me how big an angle. Before, you're going in with, this guy was with his mistress, and he was having fun, and he was drinking beers, and now he's got to pay the price. Well, now you're going in, and you go, he's paid the price, or he's paid some of the price, and you get to float the wrongly convicted, and look how he suffered. You know what I mean? So it's no longer, and by the way, there's a very strong push for the Innocence Projects and people that were wrongly convicted and spending your prime years, incarcerated in an 8x10 cell. So maybe you're not doing the same. You're not the same trial's not going on. You're not going, this playboy wants to get free so he can sleep at his girlfriend's house tonight. You're going, this man has spent 20 years behind bars, wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Now I want justice. And it's like, oh, you want justice. They want justice. Before, only they wanted justice.
Well,
now
and you
want
also,
justice.
The death penalty filter that got the case, the penalty phase reversed, that's no longer on the table. We're no longer asking about penalty phase. We're not asking about death. We're not death qualifying this jury, which means because I was saying this in real time on the record. Look, Judge, this is unfair. They really don't believe in the death penalty. They're doing it because they want a pro-prosecution jury. Well, you're not going to get that this time. You're not going to have people who are death qualified and eliminate all the people who you would think would be a little bit more open by saying, I'm against the death penalty, but at least I could put it aside. Those people weren't allowed to be on there. And in a circumstantial evidence case, you want people who can do some mental gymnastics.
Well, last question for you. How much posture is, first time around with Scott Peterson, you're on the defense, literally, figuratively, you're defending him. In this case, you could be sort of on the offense. You would say, look what they did with the death penalty, look what they did with this juror, look what they withheld the jailhouse tape from us. This man has spent 20 years, his best years eating shit on a shingle. This is an outrage. I'm fighting for justice. Where the temperament or the posture is a little more offensive rather than a sort of circle the wagons.
I think without a doubt that's the case. I mean, the temperature is different, the tone is different, and by the way, you've also got somebody that you can point at with laser-like ability as to what the prosecutor. By the way, we painted a pretty good picture of misfeasance and negligence by the Modesto Police Department. This now, I mean, you can, because you've got the entire record that has been developed, you could really do a compelling argument that they just decided they were going to get this guy convicted because of they were on such enormous pressure. And that is, I mean, take a look at some of the cases that have become kind of legion where people have been freed ever since. In the last 20 years, as you indicated. That's something that resonates.
So are there any dates anywhere? Is there any timeline?
The only date is the judge has indicated that she plans on making a decision by the end of the year.
All right. I'm going to be doing live shows everywhere. Golden, Colorado, Anchorage, Alaska, Raleigh, North Carolina.
By the way, Anchorage, Alaska, we had a family chat yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I won't tell you who's betting on who. But, except that I bet you would be at Tenny's wedding.
Oh, yeah.
They said Anchorage, Alaska to Tenny's wedding. They said that was too hard. I said, this is a guy who flies middle seat Southwest, crisscrossing the country to get back home.
Yes, I will be there with the bells on and my Nehru jacket, possibly.
Maybe the Nehru jacket, and I'll pop the Mac 25.
Go to that's also one of his clients. I don't know all the rappers, but I know Mac. All right. Go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows. What do you got, Mark?
Oh, my God. It was apparently quite a scene this past weekend in Southampton and at the V. So go by Naya in Southampton at the Capri Hotel. Go by Elixir and Gigi's at V Palm Springs. Make your way down to Casa Tropicana, Prova and Times Square in the Moxie Hotel, Prova at the Grand Central Terminal, 10E Mediterranean Tapas downtown, and at Engine Company 28, both downtown and at Terminal 8 in LAX.
So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.